Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Today we want to start by talking about cattle on wheat and some limit grazing options with Dave Lallman, our extension beef cattle specialist. And Dave, it's that time of year, cattle are either already out in the wheat pasture or will be soon, right?
A lot of cattle have been turned out already. On the wheat that was planted early, of course, is a lot further along than the field we're standing in here. This one will probably turn out on in about 2 more weeks.
In terms of limit grazing, for folks who are considering this for the first time, explain what it is and kind of how it works with wheat pasture.
We've had a lot of interest in limit grazing work that we've been doing. The principle is that you could use wheat pasture as a supplement, and particularly we're talking about use in a cow-calf operation. So you need to have a pasture with abundant forage close by the wheat pasture, and then use the wheat as a supplement to that pasture. Or you can have a dry lot or a sacrifice pasture where you feed hay and then use the wheat pasture as a supplement to the hay.
You and the team have studied limit grazing a lot, and it can really be cost effective in several different ways.
It can be because, you know, the principle is that wheat is really high quality from a nutritional standpoint. And if you are to turn cows out on wheat, let's just say gestating cows out on wheat all winter, and that's all they consume, they get overly fleshy. And that would be kind of a waste of resources. So you can use lower quality forage resource like the pasture or the hay, and the wheat as a supplement. But you can really stretch an acre of wheat pasture a long ways when you control the amount of wheat the cows consume.
What's a good sort of schedule for the rotation in and out of the pasture?
Okay, we think a gestating cow only needs somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to maybe 8 hours of wheat a week. And we've discovered that, you know, a simple way to manage that, if you have the option, is to have the water in the pasture or the dry lot area, not the wheat pasture, the native rangeland or whatever. And so then after a 3 to 4 hour grazing bout, the cows are looking for a drink. And so you just have to go open the gate and they'll come in, generally with no trouble. For a lactating cow, it's probably going to require 8 to 12 hours of wheat per week. So you could do that in 3 days, 4 hours each day. You might be able to do it in 2 days and leave them out a little longer. So it can be fairly flexible.
This pasture you mentioned isn't quite ready for cattle. What's the benchmark for producers to keep an eye on to know that it's time?
Generally 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of dry matter out in the wheat pasture, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 inches tall. It needs to be well rooted, needs to be tillered, and so you're looking for, when they're grazing, they're not pulling that wheat up by the roots.
Dual purpose wheat and limit feeding is a couple of dozens of topics that you and the team have put together in the new Extension Beef Cattle Manual, and that's available for the public, right?
It's hot off the press, the 7th edition of the Beef Cattle Manual, 43 chapters of knowledge and a pretty good sleeping pill if you're having trouble getting to sleep.
But a great reference book for farmers and ranchers, right?
There's information in there on economics, on nutrition, on reproduction, on genetics, and beef industry issues. So it's being used by a lot of other universities in our beef production courses and extension programs around the country. So we're proud of it, and we hope our Oklahoma folks will make good use of it.
Okay, well, thanks for telling us a little bit about it, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
For a link to the new Extension Beef Cattle Manual, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
You may not think that November is really a good time to spray for weeds, but Angela, it actually is.
Yeah, so in our wheat crop now is a good time to be getting out there and spraying for grassy weeds, and fall is actually the best time to make those applications so that you can get good control of those before we go through the winter. They're much more difficult to control once we get into the spring season.
Let's talk about some of the varieties of weeds that we may be seeing this time of year.
So for grasses and wheat, which are our challenge this time of year, we're going to be looking for Italian ryegrass, downy brome, and wild oat, and we're going to take a look at each one of those today. But you may also be concerned about other brome species like cheat and Japanese brome, jointed goat grass, cereal ryegrass, and even volunteer wheat, which we'll also talk a little about today.
Okay, let's talk about the first three. Let's walk through some of the characteristics of those plants.
So for the Italian ryegrass, which is very common here in the central part of Oklahoma, this is a very shiny grass, and so if you look out across your wheat fields, you're going to see that very silvery shine on those leaves compared to the wheat, which is very matte in color. It also has auricles, which is a little flap of tissue that wraps right around the stem, and we'll take a look at those really closely. And then for wild oat, it's going to look much more similar to wheat, but it's going to have a wider blade and also will have those auricles, so we'll take a look at that as well. This is wild oat, and we're showing it here today in a greenhouse pot because it's less common in the area here, but you may see it in other parts of the state where you are. Notice the leaf blades are much wider than what you would expect for wheat, so that's a way you can identify it out in your field, but the color of the leaf and the kind of structure of the plant is very similar to wheat, so that makes it a challenge sometimes. This one has been in the greenhouse for a while, so it's already starting to produce a seed head. You won't see these in your field right at this moment, but this is what you'd be looking for in spring to notice that you have a problem. These are kind of drooping seed heads, so you'll notice them in the field when the wheat is standing up. On the stem, you'll notice that they have very swollen nodes, and they often flex at the nodes, so this is a good indicator that you may have wild oat out there in your field if you're seeing those characteristics. So now we're looking at some small specimens of downy brome. So you'll notice that they're much smaller than what our wheat stands are usually right now. But these you might find in between the rows or even in the crop row in between your wheat plants. The characteristic that might be hard to see here is these are covered in small white hairs on the upper and lower surface. I have a much larger one here where we might be able to see some of those hairs because they're extremely hairy. They feel almost like velvet. And when they get really large, you'll be able to see those hairs really nicely on there. This makes them more challenging to control because the herbicides that you spray out there often sits up on top of those hairs instead of being absorbed by the plant leaf.
Let's also talk about the volunteer wheat that may be coming up where you may not want it.
Right, so many times you will go out there with your variety of choice this year, and lo and behold, the wheat that fell into the ground last year when you harvested has already come up and is starting to become a problem. The challenge there is that it's bigger and it's going to be in between the rows, and it can cause some issues. There's not a lot we can do about controlling that. You can maybe manage it on the field edges, but usually it's not a major issue unless you're a certified seed grower and you need to have a particular variety in that field.
Speaking of control, what are some of the things that producers need to be thinking about whenever they do control those other weeds?
So for our grassy weeds, we have a lot of group 2 herbicides available. The only time that's going to be a challenge is when we're talking about Italian ryegrass, which we do have resistance to that group of herbicides in Oklahoma. And for that resistant populations, then you need to be thinking about adding either a pre-Zidua, which is a little late on the timing for that right now, or looking at an Axial XL program to control that because it's a different mode of action.
Now, when should producers be applying that? Because, you know, just because it's December, January in Oklahoma, it doesn't mean it's, you know, 20 degrees outside. Plants
Certainly,
are growing.
You want, for wheat, weed control in wheat, you want to have temperatures above freezing to make your applications. Obviously, you don't want your spray broom to freeze. But now, through the next 2 to 3 weeks before we start getting really hard freezes, is a very good time. After that, you really want to wait until probably mid-February or late February to make a spring application. All of the herbicides we're talking about today have opportunities for control in both fall and spring applications, but fall is by far going to give you the best control.
Let's talk about that. What makes fall so much better than, say, a spring application?
So right now we're very moist and we have nice warm temperatures during the day, so those weeds are really actively growing. The more actively growing your weeds are, the better they're able to take up that herbicide and the better control you're going to get. If you let those weeds sit all the way through the winter, they're going to harden off, so they're going to make thicker tissues. They're going to be kind of hunkered down for the winter, and when they come out of that season, then it's going to be much more challenging to control them.
Okay, thank you much, Angela Post, weed scientist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. The rain rolled across Oklahoma early this week. On a rainfall map for Saturday through Wednesday, there is a sharp line from west to east. The western third of Oklahoma, colored blue, received less than an inch of rain. Many western locations were closer to a ½ inch. Moving east into the green areas, rain rates quickly jumped above an inch. On the far east side of the state, they collected more than 4 inches at some locations. The area left wanting for more rain was north central Oklahoma. A map going back 60 days from November 18th shows a distinct green area with 2 to 3 inches of rain over those 60 days. Even the Panhandle can boast about higher rain amounts, over 6 inches in 60 days. That area of lower rainfall shows up dry on our map of soil moisture at the 10-inch depth. Those low fractional water index values point to very dry soil moisture. While over the vast majority of Oklahoma, the 9/10ths and 1s indicate excellent soil moisture. Early Tuesday morning, Red Rock recorded the highest wind gust of 2015, 99 miles per hour. That'll carry your hat down the road many a mile. Here's Gary with a drought update and a look ahead.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, as you can see, my beard is back because winter has officially arrived. It snowed 6 inches in Boise City on Wednesday. Now, that didn't help the drought farther over to the east, but let's take a look at that drought monitor map and see what we have. Well, we did get a pretty good rainstorm, so most of the drought across the eastern third of the state is now gone. We still have those areas of moderate drought and abnormally dry conditions from north central Oklahoma down into southwestern Oklahoma. Those have lingered for the last couple of months, but hopefully we can take care of those as we look at the latest outlooks for the winter from the Climate Prediction Center. As you can see, we have increased odds of above normal precipitation, especially across that western part of the state for the December through February time frame. And that brings us to the seasonal drought outlook. This is through February. We see no chances for drought development across the state. All we see are chances for drought improvement. Those 2 areas of drought in north central and southwestern Oklahoma are expected to go away as we go through the winter. So we have drought on the run once again. Hopefully we'll have drought taken care of as we go through the winter, and we'll just sit back and enjoy some nice springtime weather after that, right? That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, joins us now. And Daryl, cattle market's sort of all over the place right now. Give us an idea of what's going on and some of the factors behind some of these trends we're seeing.
You know, it's really an interesting situation right now and very difficult to explain, frankly. You know, we normally talk about, you know, markets in terms of the fundamentals, the supply and demand factors that, you know, that determine prices and so on. And really none of those have dramatically changed. And yet we're seeing a tremendous amount of volatility and a lot of selling pressure in both live cattle and feeder cattle, primarily from the futures markets. And so, you know, I don't have a good explanation for why that's there. I think most of it is really outside of the market in terms of the fundamentals. So it's the futures market kind of driving the train right now. The cash market responds to that, and, you know, is having a fairly significant negative impact right now. In the end, you know, futures markets have to come back to where cash really is, and so we presume that this thing will sort of settle out and stabilize a little bit, but it's been a heck of a ride along the way.
Kind of week by week, it sounds like.
It really is, and you know, it's difficult because of that, because we really don't have a good explanation for why it's happening. It's hard to predict exactly when and where it will end, and where this will all you know, stabilize. But again, I think the key for producers primarily is to keep in mind that the big picture fundamentals really have not changed. And you know, there's widespread sentiment among analysts that this thing is oversold right now, that we will see some, you know, stabilization and some recovery in this thing, and that eventually cash will dominate again rather than the futures. But right now the futures is kind of leading the pack.
Here in Oklahoma, let's talk about pasture conditions. It's raining right now as we speak, and it's been a pretty decent year as far as moisture goes.
You know, we've gone into the fall in very good shape in terms of both hay and forage supplies. Wheat pasture had a lot of potential early, got very dry in some areas, but now with some recent rains, we're in much better shape, and I think in general in pretty good shape. The north central part of the state is still lacking the most in moisture, but they have gotten a couple of recent rains that at least is keeping the wheat pasture going. So I think we're in pretty good shape all in all from a cattle perspective.
Okay, Daryl Peel, thanks a lot. Wishing you and your family a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
If you're one of those operations that's growing some replacement heifers that you're going to breed next spring, then I would suggest that as you're working with your feed manufacturer, that you have them include one of the feed ingredients called ionophores to feed to those growing replacement heifers. Ionophores are those things that we can put into the diet of a yearling replacement heifer and have some real impacts. Basically, they're sold as either monensin under the trade name rumensin or lasalicid sold under the trade name of Bovatec. And both of them have three real advantages that I would consider for any good replacement heifer growing program. Number one, the heifers will grow just a little bit better, have a little better feed efficiency if they have one of the ionophores included in the diet. Number two, research has shown us that heifers that have been on an ionophore will reach puberty on the average about 2 weeks sooner than their counterparts that are getting exactly the same diet without one of the ionophores. And that just means that there'd be a higher percentage of the heifers cycling at the start of the upcoming breeding season for those heifers, and that should mean just a little better breed up of our replacement heifer crop. The third reason is that ionophores are pretty good at helping prevent the disease coccidiosis, one of those things that often occurs in the wet winter and spring months in young cattle and can be pretty devastating. And they're pretty good about helping prevent that particular disease. Also, if you're one of those that's going to grow replacement heifers out on wheat pasture this year, then I would consider using one of the mineral blocks or mineral supplements that contains the ionophore monensin, trade name rumensin. Research out at our Oklahoma wheat pasture research station through the years has shown us that the presence of monensin in the diet will reduce the incidence and the severity of bloat in cattle that are in that situation probably next spring when bloat is most likely to occur. So if we're going some replacement heifers this fall and this winter, we're putting together a feed for those replacement heifers, I would really visit with my feed manufacturer about including one of the ionophores at the recommended label rate. I think that you'll find that the results are certainly worth the little extra expense that's involved with including one of those feed ingredients. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. And Kim, harvest almost complete for the 15-16 marketing year for the world. How are things looking?
We're looking at another record crop. This will be the third record in the world, 26.9 billion bushels. Now, Australia and Argentina, South Africa, they're still cutting their wheat, and they'll cut for about another month or so before they're completely finished, but it's practically in the bin. Right now, expectations is for a record 8.4 billion bushel ending stocks around the world. In the United States, of course, our harvest was over in October, a 2.05 billion bushel crop. The average about 2.13, so it's a below average crop. But with that massive world crop, lack of export demand, our ending stocks are projected to be 911 million bushels compared to about 690 million average.
Let's take a look at why Oklahoma wheat is trading at such a tight price range right now.
That's because prices are in the tank. You know, Oklahoma, for the first time since October of 2009, some areas of Oklahoma are below $4. You look at the range, probably around $3.95 to $4.20, something like that. When prices are low, when stocks are excessive, there's just no place there's no demand, so there's no reason for prices to go up, and I think they're near the bottom now.
It's kind of tough to digest. Is the outlook any better when we say a few months down the road?
I don't see any reason for prices to move much, say, over the next couple months. As you look out at harvest, it's going to depend on what the crop is. Right now, you look around the world, I mean, our crop looks good, and it looks good around the U.S. You look at, now Ukraine's got some problems, but they're a major player, but they're a small player. So right now, it looks like we got another big crop coming around the world. If, you know, you look long term, if we have a big crop, low protein, we could lose up to another $1 in this price. If we have we got to have a really short crop, foreign crop, for prices to go up that $1 or so. Right now, it's long run is totally dependent upon how that 16 crop comes in.
Digesting all of that strategy recommended for Oklahoma producers?
Well, if you look how they should react to this, it's with concern, because for our prices, now we could get a $1 increase in price if we lose the U.S. crop, but we want wheat in the bin. We're better off with wheat in the bin and low prices than no wheat in the bin and high prices. What's got to happen is we got to lose some crops in the foreign countries, and as we lose those, we could get, like in 2010, you know, we came in June, prices down at $3 level. We had a good above average U.S. crop. We lost the foreign crop starting right at the last of June, 1st of July. Prices went from $3.32 in one location in Oklahoma to $9 about 4 months later. We need to lose some wheat in a foreign country, but prices are not going to go up until we do that.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. Kim, thanks a lot. With Thanksgiving right around the corner, it's time to talk turkey, and we're here with Darren Scott, a food scientist at the Food and Ag Product Center. And this time of year, we have our Thanksgiving dinner and then almost immediately need to take a nap. Does turkey really make us sleepy?
Well, you know, that's kind of a little bit of a rumor or a misnomer. You know, it's not really the turkey that makes us sleepy. It's reputed to be the tryptophan that's there. But you know, there's really not that much more tryptophan in turkey than there is in other poultry, sort of like chicken. Approximately 1/4 gram per 100 gram of poultry.
So you would have to eat a lot for turkey to specifically to make you sleepy?
Exactly. You know, you find tryptophan in other foods. Well, tryptophan is an essential amino acid, which just means it's a nutrient that we can't normally produce in our bodies. So we have to get it from the food that we eat. And so we find tryptophan in things like red meat, almonds, chocolate, soy, and some nuts. And so what you find is that it's this combination of carbohydrates that we eat along with the tryptophan is sort of the current thinking that causes us to get sleepy. We eat lots of yams, desserts, things with lots of sugar and carbohydrates in them during the holidays. And so this combination of turkey along with these carbohydrates, as we digest them, what happens is we indirectly influence the amount of serotonin that we have in our brains. And the serotonin actually gets metabolized into melatonin, and it's the melatonin that we think actually makes us drowsy.
And then does that make you hungry like 2 hours later eating all of that stuff in combination? Because that seems to be my habit.
It does me too.
Now, in terms, you mentioned amino acids and tryptophan. What else is that sort of composed of from a scientific point of view?
Okay. All right. Essentially, proteins are made of amino acids, and the tryptophan is an amino acid. And what we find is in our food, we have these carbohydrates, these fats, these proteins, all of these things in combination that, are part of a good meal that we metabolize. And so they all help us make us full, and they all help us make us, healthy.
Okay. And it all just kind of blends together to make for an enjoyable, I guess, Thanksgiving and all of that. Okay, a great lesson on turkey. Doesn't necessarily make you sleepy. It's all the other stuff.
It's all the other stuff in combination.
Okay, thanks for clearing up the myths. Sure. Darren Scott here at the Food and Ag Products Center. That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu. And also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at sunup.